Welcome to another episode of Out from the Horrorbox. I'm your crossover host, Dom, and in this episode, we finally see two titans of the slasher genre go head-to-head in the 2003 slasher film directed by Ronnie Yu, Freddy vs. Jason. In this corner, we have the Springwood slasher, son of 1,000 maniacs, with 8 installments of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, Freddy Krueger. And in this corner we have the Crystal Lake Killer, the man behind the mask. And with a whopping 12 installments of the Friday the 13th series, Jason Voorhees. We've put a pin in this film too long, so now place your bets, ring the bell, and let them fight. Influenced by fans' desire for a crossover film featuring a battle between Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees, New Line Cinema and Paramount Pictures attempted to bring this idea to life as early as 1987. Frank Mancuso Jr. enlisted Tom McLaughlin to bridge the gap between the studios, but no agreement could be reached at the time. When Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan underperformed at the box office, Sean S. Cunningham sought to regain the rights to Friday the 13th and collaborate with New Line Cinema on the crossover. Both Paramount and New Line were eager to acquire the rights to each other's iconic characters to control the crossover project. However, negotiations faltered, leading to Paramount's release of Jason Takes Manhattan. After the film's release in '89, the rights reverted to a group of producers, Scuderi, Manasian, and Barsamianto, who then sold them to New Line. 2 years later, director Joseph Zito made another attempt to revive the crossover, but interest from Mancuso and Robert Shea was lacking. Before Cunningham could initiate work on Freddy vs. Jason, Wes Craven returned to New Line with New Nightmare, which put the crossover project on hold. This allowed Cunningham to bring Jason back in Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, which turned a healthy profit. New Line invested around $6 million in script development, working with various writers. Louis Abernathy, known for Deep Star 6 and House 4, was initially attached to the project with the script Nightmare 13, Freddy Meets Jason. However, his limited directing experience prevented him from helming the project. David J. Shaw was brought in to revise Abernathy's script, expanding on a cult that worships Freddy Krueger. Michael DeLuca, former president of production at New Line Cinema, passed on Shaw's draft and turned to Brandon Brega and Ronald D. Moore to craft Jason vs. Freddy with a more mature tone. They eventually left the project, leading to Peter Briggs being hired due to his previous success with Alien vs. Predator. Briggs' draft included numerous returning characters, but he too departed. In a 1995 interview with Fangoria, Craven expressed his disdain for the crossover idea, viewing it as diminishing the impact and dignity of the original characters. So by 1996, Cunningham hired Cyrus Voris and Ethan Reif to write Freddy vs. Jason Millennium Massacre, with Rob Bottin slated to direct. Bottin, who had previously worked on The Thing and Total Recall, chose to develop his own treatment, and David S. Goyer and James Dale Robinson were then hired to refine Bottin's treatment into a screenplay. However, dissatisfaction with the script led to their exit. Jonathan Abel and Glenn Berger were then selected to write a new script, but their draft was not well received at Cunningham Productions. Bottin initially considered revising the script himself, but ultimately left the film. In 1999, Mark Verheiden proposed releasing the film with two possible endings, one where Freddy wins and one where Jason wins. The following year, DeLuca hired Mark Protasevich and Todd Farmer to write new scripts. Cunningham's frustration with the delayed development of Freddy vs. Jason led him to create Jason X, which took Jason out of Crystal Lake and into space. Eventually, Mark Swift and Damian Shannon were brought on board after impressing DeLuca with their pitch in March 2002. Goyer returned to help trim the script. Interest came from several directors who all declined. An up-and-coming filmmaker, oh man, how do you say this? I don't want to mispronounce it. I think it's supposed to be Dwam Belagera. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. Campaigned to direct. Despite his ambitious premise, Jason X struggled due to lack of support following the resignation of president of production Michael DeLuca. The film sat on the shelf for 2 years before its release in April 26, 2002. It became the lowest grossing film in the series, despite having the largest budget to date. Early discussions with Adam Marcus and Dean Lorey, who worked on Jason Goes to Hell, did not result in a finalized deal. Ultimately, Ronnie Yu was signed in May 2000, given significant creative freedom. Swift and Shannon noted that various endings were considered, including one involving a surprise appearance by Pinhead from the Hellraiser franchise, but New Line chose not to pursue securing those rights. So, after a decade and a half, we finally got the crossover of the century. Now let's see who wins in this clash of terror titans.
Warn your friends. Warn everyone.
Welcome to my nightmare.
We're not safe awake or asleep.
Why won't you die?
Go to hell!
Freddy versus Jason.
Place your bets.
Since his last defeat, Freddy Krueger, continued to be played by Robert Englund, has been in hell and unable to invade children's dreams, as adults of Springwood have gone to extremes to ensure that the children there have all forgot him. All mention of him have been removed from the public records, and any children who dream of him are forcibly institutionalized at Weston Hills Psychiatric Hospital to contain the spread. They are giving the dream-suppressant drug Hypnosil. A frustrated Freddy resurrects Jason Voorhees and appears as Jason's mother, Pamela Voorhees, to manipulate him into thinking his mother wants him to go to Elm Street and kill. This will create fear in the townsfolk and make them believe that Freddy has returned, allowing him to regain his power. Jason is played by Ken Kersinger, and Pamela Voorhees is played by Paula Shaw, respectively. Lori Campbell, played by Monica Keena, lives with her widowed father. During a sleepover with her friends, Kia gives emotionally abusive boyfriend Trey and his friend Blake. Jason murders Trey and then kills Blake and his father. The police label it a murder-suicide, hoping to conceal Freddy's return from the town. Kia, Gibb, Trey, Blake, and Blake's father are played by Kelly Rowland, Catherine Isabel, Jesse Hutch, David Kopp, and Brent Chapman, respectively. Lori's ex-boyfriend, Will Rollins, and his friend Mark Davis, who are both involuntary psychiatric patients at Weston Hills due to their previous contact with Freddy, see a news report about the killings and decide to escape to warn Lori. Will and Mark are played by Jason Ritter and Brendan Fletcher, respectively. That night, Lori and her friends attend a rave in a cornfield. Freddy tries to kill Gibb in a nightmare, but Jason kills her first in the real world and goes on a murder rampage at the rave, angering Freddy, who realizes that Jason's killing spree will deny him victims. The friends escape the rave, with school nerd Charlie and stoner Bill, who are played by Chris Marquette and Kyle Labine, respectfully. Will and Laurie witness Mark getting killed by Freddy. Deputy Scott Stubbs, played by Lachlan Monroe, helps the teens. And learning about Hypnosil, they try to steal it from Weston Hills to suppress their dreams. However, Freddy uses Bill to dispose of the medicine. Jason kills Stubbs, and Freddy uses the possessed Bill to tranquilize Jason, causing him to fall asleep after slashing Bill in half. The teens devise a plan to pull Freddy from the dream world into reality and force him to fight Jason, bringing the unconscious Jason back to Camp Crystal Lake in New Jersey. Freddy fights Jason in the dream world, where he discovers that Jason has a fear of drowning. He uses this to his advantage, causing Jason to revert to his younger self. Laurie goes to sleep to pull Freddy out and save Jason. Freddy tortures Laurie in her dream, revealing that he murdered her mother. Jason awakens at the real Camp Crystal Lake and pursues the teens, fatally injuring Charlie. Laurie wakes up and pulls Freddy into the physical world, where Jason confronts him. Freddy and Jason fight throughout the campgrounds, during which Jason kills Kia. As Freddy gains the upper hand, Laurie distracts him, allowing Jason to punch through his torso. Freddy plunges Jason's machete into his side, and Jason rips off Freddy's gloved arm. Laurie and Will set the dock on fire, causing an explosion that throws Freddy and Jason into the lake. Freddy climbs out and is about to kill the pair, but is impaled by Jason with his gloved arm, allowing Laurie to behead Freddy with Jason's machete. Jason, Freddy's head, and his body sink into the lake, seemingly dead. The next morning, Jason emerges from the lake, holding his machete and Freddy's head. Freddy winks at the camera, leaving the winner ambiguous. Alright, it's time to check out some trivia about the film Freddy vs. Jason and learn some things about the behind the scenes, the production, and the actors. So first up, during the film's long gestation period, at least 17 scripts were submitted, most of which dealt with cults that were attempting to resurrect Freddy and Jason to come back and fight. These were eventually turned into one script that the producers decided for some time to go ahead with, but they eventually changed their minds. They also could not agree on the ideas proposed. Eventually, in 2001, Damian Shannon and Mark Swift came in to pitch their ideas without restrictions while they were working on another project for New Line Cinema. The two noted that most previous writers had ignored the mythology and history of the characters, so their approach was to basically keep it all intact, make it all count, don't discount the other movies, and the fans will love you for it. The producers felt their script was indeed much closer to the Freddy and Jason backstories. And honestly, I like that. I like that they did. I don't know if this is considered canonical. I know to the Friday 13th canon, I think this is canonical. I'm not sure about Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm not sure if this is canon, but I know for Friday the 13th, this is, because they definitely take place after, or Jason X takes place after this. They deliberately set that one far into the future so that they wouldn't have to worry about where this is set. I do know that it's kind of weird with Nightmare because I think the sixth one discounts some of them, but then again it doesn't. So it's like, where is it canonical? So in the end of the day, I think it's canon to both series, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, obviously it is to the Friday the 13th because we do see Freddy's gloved hand at the end of Jason Goes to Hell, Final Friday. We do know that Jason X skips time in order to give this breathing room, and I don't know. I assume with this one, it is canon for both, I think. Rob Zombie was offered to direct this film, but turned it down to work on his pet project, House of a Thousand Corpses. He would later make Halloween. He would do the remake of that, which was the third big horror film franchise in the 1980s, aside from Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. I mean, Halloween kind of, you could say, started that wave of the slasher in the 80s. It wasn't the first slasher film or like first ever, but it was like one of the first ones to jumpstart that trend that we had for that decade of 80s where it was like nothing but slashers, because it was seen as, wow, these are really cheap to make and they can be really profitable. So it'll make us a lot of money. Well, we don't have to spend that much money. And they pumped them out. As we saw with Friday the 13th, there's how many within just the 80s is like, it's all of them except for I think the last two and this, I guess. So that's like 11 films within 10 years about. Wow, Jesus Christ. Or is it 10 films? I don't know. But almost all the Nightmare on Elm Streets are in the 80s except for the last 3 or 4, I guess, with this one. Whatever. But yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that Rob Zombie was offered this, because when you think about it, like, he hadn't even directed House of a Thousand Corpses yet, so they were already going to him to be like, hey, you want to direct this? Because he had already directed like his music videos, so I think they got a sense of where like they kind of wanted it to. They were thinking it could go with him. I'm kind of glad they didn't go with Rob Zombie, because honestly, I'm not a huge fan of his movies. I've seen House of a Thousand Corpses. It's fine. I tried watching Devil's Rejects. Is that that's the second one, right? I just couldn't get. There was like a point in it where I was just like, I can't get into this. I don't like the style of it. There's what I love about House of a Thousand Corpses though is that about like all the cut footage and all the footage that he had to like cut out and like that's deleted and stuff. There's just a lot of that, and that's just gone about. And there's like a whole like side story about like Sasquatch and stuff. It's crazy. Like you kind of see glimpses of it in the film with like those weird like there's like these weird like interlude cut things in the movie that break up the story, and it's just so weird. It's like out of nowhere. I don't know. I know there's people that love that movie. I'm just like I'm not that big of a fan. The opening of the film uses plenty of flashback footage from the previous Nightmare films, but none from the Friday the 13th films. This is because New Line Cinema obtained the legal rights to the Jason Voorhees character to make sequels, but not footage from the previous films, which remained with Paramount Pictures. And that's kind of where we've been with Friday the 13th. It's such a weird... I don't understand why the rights are so weirdly like tied up like this. But yeah, there's like the character of Jason Voorhees is owned by one person. The idea of Friday the 13th is owned by another person. And then like the sequels are owned by these other. It's a whole tangled mixed web of just a bunch of junk. And that's what they've been. Why we haven't gotten a new Friday the 13th in years is because after they remade it in 2009, some of the rights reverted back to one person, other rights were kept by other people, and so they were trying to say that no, they own all the rights, and then when they finally settled, I think maybe like a year or two ago? Maybe it was like 2 years now. When they finally settled on the rights, on who has the rights to this, who has the right to that, it came away with like one person owns just the rights to the hockey-masked, machete-wielding character Jason Voorhees. Then the other people own the rights to the story of Friday the 13th that we originally see, and so that's why it's like they can get a remake of like the first one. But in order to bring in Jason, as we know him, with the hockey mask that we've seen for most of the movies, that's where like you have to bring in other people and try and get them to sign away the rights. Not sign away the rights, but get them involved to use the rights. And it's crazy. It's a whole fucked up jumble of whatever. And okay, so then also this kind of helped prove that the Nightmare is canon to this too. So both series are canon too, which is kind of crazy. I thought this was all set outside of the canon. This was non-canonical to both series, but obviously I'm wrong. So this would be the Final Nightmare is 6, and then New Nightmare is 7. This would be the 8th film in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and then this is the 12th film in the Friday the 13th franchise. So yeah, so it's either you can put it there or you can put it there, but it crosses those. This is where it crosses over for both. Just kind of crazy. That it's canon to both. But also that's what happens when you get legal rights, especially with sequels and stuff. It's that's what I like about what's his name? Don. Oh my gosh, from A Child's Play. From Child's Play, the Don Man. No, not Mike. I forgot his name. The creator of Child's Play, he owns the rights to Chucky, to what we see, what we know of as that's why when they remade it, it's a whole thing. They had to come up with a whole new story. They could use the names Andy and stuff and Chucky, but they couldn't do a full on remake with the voodoo and all that stuff. All that stuff is owned by the guy who originally did it, and that's why he was able to make the Seed of Chucky, not Seed of Chucky, Cult of Chucky, and what's the other one? Curse of Chucky and Cult of Chucky. He was able to make those on a lower budget, but by himself he was able to. He didn't have to get permission from a studio. He didn't have to do this or that. He could just make it because he owns the rights to that. They let him keep the rights, and then he was able to make his show. And I think he's making another film. But Chucky's lasted a long time, and I think it's because for a good reason, because that guy he knew when to keep it and knew when to hey, let's bring him back now. And then they did bring him back for a little bit, and then I think Seed of Chucky got too weird and meta. But it came out at a time where meta was in, but I don't. Seed of Chucky is kind of ridiculous, but yeah, when you get into legal rights about certain things, sometimes some people own something that you didn't know, and then your whole thing falls apart, and you're stuck in production hell like this. So according to Friday the 13th wiki website, Freddy vs. Jason takes place in autumn 2003, 2 months after Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, which occurred in June 2003, and 5 years before Jason Voorhees was captured by the Camp Crystal Lake Research Facility at the beginning of Jason X, which occurred in 2008. So even though, I think I brought this kind of up in the Friday, when I was going through Friday the 13th. I think I kind of brought it up too when I was talking about in the Nightmare on Elm Street, is that it because there is a point in Final Friday, Freddy's Dad Friday, where it says, I think at the beginning it says 10 years after the last one, or 10 years from now or something. It opens 10 years after, I think, the last one. So so that it's it jumps ahead, but so does Friday the 13th, obviously, because this one has to take place in 2003. So which means that Final Friday, had even though it came out in 1993, actually is set in 2003. And even though Jason X came out before this film in 2001, it's actually set after that in 2008. Well, the beginning part is when he gets captured by the Camp Crystal Lake Research Facility. And it's just kind of crazy when they start doing all this stuff where it's like, oh, this one's actually set here in the future. This one's set actually way down here. It's another thing like, I think Child's Play. I'm going back to that one. At the third one jumps ahead from when Andy's like, what? Like, I think he's supposed to be like 7 or something, or 8, or maybe even younger in the second one. But then it jumps ahead to when he's like a teenager. He's like almost 18. He's like closer to that. And then, so it jumps ahead like a bunch. And that's like a year apart. Their movies are like a year apart. So when you get to, what's it called? Bride of Chucky, is that one supposed to be set even further ahead? Or is it supposed to be set when it is? And then that time period, it's just that one just happened not too long before. And I think that's what it is. I think it's just that the third one is set actually closer to Bride of Chucky. It's just been a lot longer of time. But it just makes it crazy too, because it's like, you're like, how could wait, you're telling me that these people who are acting like it's like the early 90s, they got no cell phones or anything, that's supposed to be 2003? You kidding me? It's pretty funny. I like when movies do that. When it's like, oh, it's supposed to be set like ahead, and it's like, but it's obviously like from that time period, like when like it's like the 90s or something, and oh no, this is supposed to be like the 2000s, or like it's just because like retroactively they had to put it like move it to like this time or whatever. I don't know, whatever. It's funny, like when things like this like line up like that, where it's like, in order to fit like when this movie is, it's like, oh wait, that movie had to be 2 months before. So all the stuff with him like getting blown up and like the worm thing, like, and then like getting rebirthed and stuff, all that happened 2 months ago. And then what happened to all that stuff, all that lore? I don't know. So it's so funny. That's what I love about. I think that's the thing about the Friday the 13th I love, but I'll talk about it later. So there were several endings that were considered for the film. I'm going to go over one that I find very interesting, that I almost kind of wish they kind of went for, or just like something similar. Honestly, I just love more of like this battle between, like, you know, people we've seen, you know, doing things their own for a while, and having like this like knowledge of, oh, they all existed in the same universe, kind of like with Behind the Mask, where it's like they're all like real people, like they reference these people as if like, oh yeah, that's like a job, they just go around killing people. But let's get into the ending that I kind of wish maybe would have happened. So one had Freddy and Jason battling to the death on the dock. Freddy finally rips out Jason's heart, but an explosion throws him into the fiery lake. Freddy tries to swim away, but Jason puts a death lock on his ankle, and then something strange starts to happen. A glowing red hole opens at the bottom of the lake bed, draining the entire lake and dragging them both down. The next day, Crystal Lake is completely dry, and Laurie is reunited with her father. They walk down into the dry lake, where Dr. Campbell sees Freddy's claw on the ground and picks it up, vowing to destroy it for good. Then a red and green striped arm bursts through the earth, grabs Dr. Campbell's leg, and pulls him down. With one leg buried in the ground, he screams for Laurie, but is yanked again. His other leg breaks against his chest at an impossible angle before he disappears in the ground completely, with Laurie screaming and clawing through the dirt for him. The next scene takes place somewhere very dark. As Freddy puts his claw back on, he sees Jason near him, machete gleaming. They go at each other again, but then chains shoot out, slicing into both of them. They're separated, struggling to go at each other, when out from the darkness comes Pinhead from Hellraiser and says, "Now, what seems to be the problem?" However, New Line Cinema didn't like the idea because they'd have to buy the rights to use the character, and they thought Pinhead was too low rent, so he was changed to Satan, sitting high atop a stone throne, only his eyes and tips of its two horns visible in the darkness. Below, Freddy and Jason battle each other in a gladiator-style pit. In the script's final draft, this was changed to Freddy and Jason battling in a dark pit surrounded by the eyes of 1,000 dark demons and 1,000,000 tortured souls. The writers wanted to suggest that the fight would continue for all eternity, but that concept was also abandoned. Other ideas involved a giant red hand coming out of Crystal Lake at the end, grabbing Freddy and Jason and yanking them both down into hell. The ending used in the film was actually conceived by producer Robert Shea. It was originally to be followed by an epilogue that was actually shot, where Laurie and Will begin to have sex for the first time. However, Will starts acting like a maniac and eventually sprouts a Freddy Krueger claw, then proceeds to slash at Laurie. Writer Mark Swift revealed that he disliked this epilogue, which he had not written, because it raised too many questions. Does this mean Freddy won? Where's Jason? Is this a dream? Is Will turning evil and is now some sort of son of Freddy? Swift was relieved that the scene was cut due to miserable test scores, in which the audience thought the acting was terrible. And that, I mean, honestly though, if they'd gone with the whole Pinhead thing, you know how crazy the audience would have gone? Like, and then obviously we would have wanted a second one. Freddy versus Jason versus Pinhead. But just imagine like how crazy that would have been. I mean, they had already tried to do, after this, they would try to do a Pinhead versus Halloween or Michael Myers. And I think they wanted to call it Halloween. And like, I could kind of see that one a little bit. But honestly, I just wish they would just do a movie where they brought all of them together. And it would be kind of crazy to see, like, you know, Pinhead versus Michael versus Jason versus Leatherface versus Freddy. You know, some of them versus, like, Chucky. You know, like, some of them would be a little ridiculous. Some of them would be less or more ridiculous than others. Obviously, like, Michael can only survive or withstand. So, well, see, because they do show him withstanding a lot within his own franchise. And it's like, so where in the canon of Halloween are you pulling him from? So are you pulling him from, like, the Thorn trilogy? Are you pulling him from, like, the newer trilogy? Are you pulling him from Rob Zombies? And then the same thing with, like, Pinhead. Like, are you counting any of the later movies that, like, that kind of suck? Or are you just going with, like, the original appearances? Like, do you just count the first two? Do you count at least, like, the first four? See, at least with, like, these ones, like, with Friday the 13th, they never try and say, like, nothing's canon. Everything's canon to... Every single movie is canon, I guess, except for, like, the remake, just because that's a whole remake. But other than that, every single movie of the Friday the 13th is canon. Every single movie of Nightmare on Elm Street is canon. Besides, like, the remake. So it's kind of harder to, like, do that. And then, like, you could do the same thing with Chucky. I mean, that'd be kind of cool, like, Freddy versus Jason versus Chucky. That'd be kind of an interesting thing to throw in there. Like, I understand, like, he wouldn't even be able to, like, he'd have to be, like, using his brain most of the time to fight Jason. But I feel like he could. I feel like he really could hold his own against Jason if he had, like, the right... Like, if there was, like, if you're going off of, like, the continuity of what Don Mancini, that's his name. God, I don't know why I couldn't remember his name. Don Mancini is at this point now where if you haven't been watching it, you know that it's kind of a spoiler if you haven't been watching Chucky in, like, the last decade. He's been able to, like, transfer his soul in multiple different bodies of, like, the dolls. So there's multiple dolls. There's a bunch of dolls that are him. So you could just bring those all in. They all like get together and tackle him down. I don't know. I feel like hearing him going up against like Freddy would be pretty funny. Like they're both like quipping at each other. But then even like Pinhead, I feel like would have been a good like twist ending to have. Like it would have been like just on that like to top like what happened in Friday the 13th, Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, where Freddy's gloved hand comes out of the ground, grabs the mask and pulls it down. Like that was awesome at the time. Honestly, when you see that in the end and you're just like, what? And it leads to Freddy versus Jason. Whoa. And if we would have got that, it would have just been like that, but like times 1,000. That's what I think. But I mean, I bet there's people out there who would have been like, oh, what? You can't put him against like these guys. Like he's more supernatural. It's like Freddy is literally in a dream. How more supernatural do you want him to be? Jason can come back from anything, apparently. We learned that he may be a deadite. So I don't even understand where you're saying these guys aren't that supernatural. That's why I'm saying like you could bring in somebody like Chucky and it would work because he's just as supernatural as they are. He used voodoo to get into the body. The only one who's like not really supernatural, that's why I'm saying if you bring him from like the Thorn trilogy, I think that's when Michael would work, because then you could be like, oh, see, like it's because of the thorn, the rune of the whatever, the sign of thorn, that he's able to come back and keep coming back to kill. But then like why would he be after them? Like you'd say maybe like one of them is related to Laurie, but then or part of his family or something. I don't know. But I don't know. I just think it would be kind of cool. It would have been cool at the end, like you got that like surprise of like even like Satan or something, like at the very end, you have the devil just sitting there like, oh, now you're gonna fight for eternity, and it's just like this never-ending fight that they have to keep doing as their like kind of torture, punishment. I don't know. Would they be tortured or punished in hell? I don't know. Kind of strange. Kill counter. Alright, so we've arrived at the kill counter, where we go through the kills and deaths in Freddy vs. Jason. There are 20 kills and deaths in the movie, which is a lot more than most of the sequels in these two franchises. Let's see what kind of havoc these titans wreak. First up, we have Trey, Gibbs' boyfriend, lying on his stomach with a beer in his hand, unaware of Jason's presence. Jason stabs him at least 10 times in the back with a machete and then pulls up each end of the bed inwards, folding Trey's body backwards, snapping his spine. Next, Blake awakens from his nightmare. He finds his dad sitting next to him on the porch swing in silence. When Blake tries to grab his attention by shaking his shoulder, his head falls off and reveals to him that he's been decapitated by Jason off screen. As he turns around, Jason appears before him. He brings his machete down upon Blake, who tries to deflect the blow with his dad's severed head, but this was not enough to keep from being killed. His blood splatters all over the windows of his house. Gib, while at the cornfield rave party, passes out drunk and ends up in Freddy Krueger's nightmare, while at the same time a raver discovers her and attempts to rape her while she's unconscious. Just as Freddy has Gib cornered in a locker and prepares to kill her, a hole suddenly bursts through her chest in the dream world, as in the real world. Gib and the raver are both impaled by Jason. Mistaking Jason for some hillbilly farmer, Shaq, a local high school football player, gets in his face and calls him Jethro and tells him to go find a pig to fuck. Jason responds by grabbing Shaq's unnamed friend and twisting his head around until it faces backwards. Shaq then throws the remaining Everclear onto Jason and shouts, "Burn, motherfucker!" as he lights him up with a tiki torch. The alcohol causes flames to erupt all over Jason, and Shaq began running away in fear. Then Jason, using his flaming machete, he hurls it at him, spearing Shaq through the chest, killing him instantly. Ravers are partying when Jason comes into the clearing in the cornfield. He slashes six of them to death with his machete. Near the end of the movie, Mark falls asleep, is tortured by Freddy via a vision of his dead brother, sets his back on fire, and kills him by slashing him in the face. There's a security guard who's crushed to death by a door that Jason breaks down. Deputy Stubbs watches over the group as Jason Voorhees makes his way to the security station. Linderman flees, and Jason swung his machete into Stubbs. Stubbs evades the first attack, but the machete hits the computer panel, sending an electrical current into Voorhees' body. Jason grabs Stubbs and acts as a conduit for the discharge, electrocuting the deputy until he was dead. The group was fleeing from Jason, but Freeberg, who was possessed by Freddy, stayed behind to wait for Jason. When Jason appears, Freeberg injects him with 2 needles full of sedative, but was bisected at the waist before Jason was rendered unconscious from the sedative, and when Freeberg took control of his body again. One night, Mrs. Campbell is attacked by Freddy Krueger. Her husband grabs a knife and tries to fend off Freddy Krueger with a knife, but fails, and Mrs. Campbell is killed when Freddy stabs her in the stomach. The incident is witnessed by Laurie's ex-boyfriend, Will Rollins, who falsely believes that Dr. Campbell was responsible for the murder. Charlie Linderman is impaled against shelf brackets and bleeds out by Jason. And Kia is slashed with a machete, flies against a tree by Jason as she distracts Freddy, only to get pinned to the tree by Jason. And most of these deaths are Jason. I counted through, I think like 18 of these are Jason and only 2 are Freddy. Like, I mean, it kind of goes along with their series too. I mean, Jason has all these kills, and Freddy actually doesn't have that many kills. I don't know what you're going to do if they're outside of the dream. Like, how often can you really get them to do too much? But those are our deaths and our kills for this film, Freddy vs. Jason. So we've never really gotten a sequel. I know that they were working on one for a long time. So the only kind of continuation we actually got was through a comic book. There was a comic book called Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash. And it's a 6-issue limited comic book series released from November 2007 to March 2008. Published by Wildstorm, which is DC Comics, and Dynamite Entertainment. It was created by James Kuhurick, with illustrations by Jason Craig. The series serves as a sequel to Freddy vs. Jason and the Evil Dead trilogy. It is based on Freddy vs. Jason 2 film treatment by Jeff Katz. So obviously someone kind of came up with like an idea for what it was, and let's just kind of go through it really quickly. So, set in December 2008, 5 years after the events of Freddy vs. Jason, and 16 years after Army of Darkness, the story follows former protagonists Will Rollins and Laurie Campbell, who return to Crystal Lake in search of closure. Their journey ends tragically when Jason Voorhees murders them and takes their decomposed bodies to his secluded shack in the woods. There, Jason enters a trance, and both Freddy Krueger and a false version of Jason's mother, Pamela Voorhees, appears to him. Freddy, now powerless and trapped within Jason's mind, learns of the Necronomicon, an ancient book hidden in the Voorhees home that holds the power to resurrect him. Freddy and the false Pamela manipulate Jason into retrieving the Necronomicon, promising him that it will make him a real boy. Meanwhile, Ash Williams, summoned to the newly established Crystal Lake S-Mart to lend his retail expertise, soon becomes entangled in the horror. Mistaking Jason's killings for the work of Deadites, Ash follows a group of teenagers to the Voorhees house, where he discovers a Necronomicon. However, Jason arrives, slaughters the teens, and escapes with the book. Back at the S-Mart, Ash and the remaining employees devise a plan to confront Jason, but the killer disrupts their efforts, murdering most of them and absconding with the Necronomicon. Freddy uses the book to restore his powers and enhance Jason's intelligence. As Ash and the survivors regroup at Carolyn's house, Freddy invades their dreams, intensifying the nightmare. The story culminates in a climactic showdown at the Voorhees home, where Freddy has harnessed the full power of the Necronomicon to alter reality. Jason, now more intelligent, turns against Freddy, seeking to claim the Necronomicon's power for himself. In the final confrontation, Freddy resurrects Jason's previous victims as Deadites, unleashing them upon Ash and Jason while transforming the Voorhees home into a nightmare version of the Elm Street house. Ultimately, Ash, with the aid of his remaining allies, defeats both Freddy and Jason. He uses the Necronomicon to open a portal, banishing Freddy to the Deadite world, and isolates Jason and the Necronomicon beneath a frozen crystal lake, bringing an end to the horrific clash between these two iconic figures. So after that, we did get a continuation of that story as well. Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, the Nightmare Warriors. In a 6-issue limited comic book series published from August to December 2009 by Dynamite Entertainment and DC Comics under the Wildstorm imprint, so same people. It was written by Jeff Katz and James Couric again, with artwork by Jason Craig again. The series continues the crossover saga Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, which itself followed the 2003 film Freddy vs. Jason and the Evil Dead trilogy. So in this sequel, the narrative picks up with a group of government agents led by director Gordon Russell excavating Crystal Lake in search of the Necronomicon Ex Mortis for a covert operation known as Project Black Book. After Russell departs with the book, his team dives into the lake to retrieve Jason Voorhees' body. However, Jason awakens and murders them, spurred on by Freddy Krueger, who is masquerading again as Pamela Voorhees to seek out Ash Williams. By June 2009, Ash, now living a quiet life in Franklin, Michigan, with his girlfriend Caroline, is preparing for a barbecue when Dr. Maggie Burroughs arrives. She seeks Ash's help for a group she and Dr. Neil Gordon have formed to combat unnatural evils. Ash dismisses her, leaving for supplies and inadvertently leaving Caroline alone. During his absence, Jason kills Caroline. Meanwhile, Russell at the Pentagon reveals his plan to create a demonic army using the Necronomicon. As Ash discovers Caroline's body and flees, a mysterious man in a Hummer observes him. At the Pentagon, Russell uses modern technology and the Necronomicon to bring a seemingly powerless Freddy back to Earth. Ash boards a train to Baltimore in search of Maggie and her group, while Jason follows, stowing away in the boxcar. Maggie's group, consisting of Stephanie Kimball, her father Stephen, Alice Johnson and her son Jacob, Tina Shepard, and Rennie Wickham, are attacked by Jason at Maggie and Neil's home. Tommy Jarvis, Jason's oldest enemy, arrives just in time to help. Government agents eventually kill Jason with bullets and missiles, but the survivors retreat to a motel. Maggie proposes using the Necronomicon to defeat their enemies. Tommy, however, leaves to pursue his own plan. At the Capitol, Jason is imprisoned with Deadites and visited by Freddy, who proposes an alliance to devastate the world. Jason agrees, especially when he learns that his old adversaries, including Tommy, are coming for him. Freddy revives Jason and makes him the general of his Deadite army. The survivors, minus Stephanie and Jacob, arrive at the Capitol and are imprisoned, while Maggie, Neil, and Rennie are taken to see Freddy. Freddy, now fully powered by the Necronomicon, transforms into his demonic form. Maggie reveals her true identity as Freddy's daughter, Catherine Krueger, and kills Russell before attacking Neil and Rennie. Tina, sensing Rennie's death, uses her telekinesis to escape with Ash and Alice, while Jason and his Deadites rampage through Washington. Ash, Tina, and Alice fight and destroy a Freddy-controlled robot to reclaim the Necronomicon. Meanwhile, Tommy battles Jason in the streets of Washington. Tommy is captured by winged deadites and taken to Freddy. At the motel, Freddy possesses Stephanie, who attacks Jacob, forcing Alice and her team to enter Jacob's nightmare. Alice and Tina manage to restore Stephanie's physical form. At the White House, Tommy and Jacob are held hostage by Freddy, Jason, and Maggie. Disguised as the president, Freddy announces his grim new policy of no kid left alive. Ash and his allies break into the White House amidst a bloody assault from the Deadites, aided by a distracted army. Stephanie, now aligned with Freddy's vision, dons a hockey mask and seeks to kill Jason. In a climactic battle, Maggie and Jason fight, but are interrupted by Ash, who drives a tank into the room, killing Maggie. Alice, weakened by a terminal illness, allows Freddy to kill her to transfer her Dream Master powers to Jacob. Jacob, now the Dream Master, summons the spirits of Amanda Krueger and the Dream Warriors to defeat the Deadite army. However, Freddy wounds Jacob and severs their connection to Earth. As Tina aids Jacob, Ash fights Freddy. Tommy manages to wound Jason with a machete and a shard of glass, but Freddy absorbs Jason's soul to boost his power. Neil and Nancy Thompson use the Necronomicon to open a vortex to the Deadite dimension. As Freddy resists the vortex, the Necronomicon rejects him. Ash shoots Freddy into the vortex, likely sealing his fate at the hands of the Deadites. Meanwhile, Nancy and the spirits rejoin their realm. The series concludes with a time-displaced agent Wesley Carter pulled into the Necronomicon's vortex, arriving in 1964 Springwood. He inadvertently signs Fred Krueger's search warrant, altering history and preventing Krueger's rebirth as a monster in that timeline. So, I mean, I guess it kind of ends kind of like a happy ending. Honestly, I kind of like everything that happens in the second part more than the first one, because you got a lot of the returning characters from the stories, which I kind of wish were in the first part. I get that it's mainly supposed to be like a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. It's supposed to be like this. All three of them are like trying to fight each other. But it would have been cool to see like Tommy Jarvis come back, right, in that first part, and then like Tina, and then Alice Johnson and like Jacob, all these characters from the previous installments that we didn't get to see like come back. It'd just be kind of cool. But I do like that idea, that concept of especially because Jason Goes to Hell, Final Friday, it incorporates the Necronomicon and the Kandarian dagger, and it doesn't outright say that they're what they are, but they are what they are. Like, everyone knows that's what they are. Like, you get to see them. They don't explicitly be like, oh, that's the Necronomicon, but you see it in the movie. So you know that what it's hinted at is that, for that Jason's, he might be a Deadite. So, who knows? I honestly would love to have seen this too. Just any kind of continuation of this franchise or the series. The series would have been cool. Okay, so now's the part where we get to my final thoughts. So Freddy vs. Jason, right? So let's just take this thing apart, right? So first off, if you go back, you listen to my whole thing on the Friday the 13th, after watching and going through everything and seeing each one, one by one, and understanding that franchise a lot better now, I actually really like it a lot more. You know, especially Jason. I think he's a pretty cool, like, killing machine. I love. There's my favorite ones are like the third one when he gets the mask. The fourth one's pretty good. You know, we get introduced to Tommy Jarvis, and that run. Those three are pretty good. You know, it's part 4, which is the final chapter. Part 5, New Beginning. Part 6, Jason Lives. After that, we get the New Blood, which is where we get the telekinetic girl who's fighting Jason. And then we get Jason Takes Manhattan, which is obviously not the best one. Then we get Final Friday. Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday. And then after that, we didn't get anything for the longest time. They were waiting to do this movie. Then we got Jason X. And then finally we got this one. And then we got a remake. And, you know, my respect for this franchise, the Friday the 13th, really grew a lot. And I really liked it. The appreciation for those films, you know, it's like, yeah, you probably got one every year, like with Saw. It was like back to back to back for a long time. But really, though, I really love that franchise. Now, Nightmare on Elm Street, going back and watching these, it's like, man, the first one was so good. The third one is so good. And then, like, New Nightmare are like, those are like the solid ones. It's just, there's just a lot of, like, the second one's okay. I liked it because, you know, it's something really different from all the other ones. You know, Freddy possessing a body and coming out like that. And it's pretty solidly pure LGBTQIA plus movie or whatever. And you can just see it from everything that it does in it, every choice it makes. But then you get like the Dream Master and the Dream Child and Final Friday and Freddy's Dead, Final Friday. And it's just like this string of like, you just didn't know what to do, huh? You just kind of didn't know what to do with it. It's like you should have just let Wes Craven have it again, or like let it die, like he said. The remake just was not, like, it's funny too, because I go back and I think about the remake of Friday the 13th, and I look at the remake from Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm just like, man, what happened? Because it's made by the same people, same studio and everything, Platinum Dooms, and it's just like, you guys just dropped the ball. Like, I don't know what you guys did with Nightmare on Elm Street, that you guys just completely ruined it. You just took that source material and we're like, we're gonna do the opposite. But with like Jason, it was, or like Friday the 13th, it was like, you guys were like, let's just do as much as we can as an homage in the first like bits of it to the first 4, and then we can tell a whole new story. And you know what? It worked out really well. And I think that one works out pretty well. And, you know, I think going back and forth, the Nightmare on Elm Street now kind of falters in my mind, because I'm like, man, I thought Freddy was like such a badass going into like both these series, and then I'm like, well, in Dream Master, Dream Child, like, it's like really those 3 movies kind of just take it down such a, like, to where it's like, man, I like, this is why they can't, like, they canceled it. Like, and it sucks too, because like Freddy didn't have that many films to begin with in total. There, if you include this one, which I do, I'm gonna start including this in when I'm saying them, because Friday the 13th has 13 with this film, and Nightmare on Elm Street has 9 with this film, and it just sucks that, like, you know, that Nightmare didn't get that big of a series. But, you know, like Wes Craven kind of said, like, how much more can you do with this character? And, you know, he's so synonymous with Robert Englund that it has to be Robert Englund. When you try and change it, like, it can work. I think it will work in the future if they finally give us a new Nightmare on Elm Street. But the thing is, you got to give us someone like Jackie or Haley. I think would have done good if you'd let him be more Freddy, like from Freddy in Dream Warriors, right? You let him be like that. You give him a little bit of quips, but he's still a serious kind of character, so ready to kill everybody. And I think it would have worked out pretty well. But let's get back to this film, which is the culmination of everything we've seen in all those films, except for Jason X, because technically that takes place after this, and the two remakes, obviously. I think for the years of building up these two characters, and I love I think they did like a thing where they had them both come out like they were boxers and like weighed them both, and you know Freddy got to talk shit to Jason and stuff, and you know you this kind of idea of like they're finally gonna have these two titans of the slasher industry are gonna go at it, and I think honestly it works really well. There's some things here and there you can totally tell this is a movie from like the mid 2000s because there's just like some things like it's got that like it was what I was trying to describe in the remake to Nightmare on Elm Street. It's got that like kind of grimy feeling, just a little bit, but it feels like the movies around. Like I know what you did last summer. I know that was from earlier in the 2000s, but it still feels like those kinds of films. And I think, you know, the characters are okay. I really wish they would have brought back like maybe like Tommy Jarvis. I know they didn't have the rights, but you bring back somebody like Tommy Jarvis. You bring back I don't know, even like Alice Johnson or something, right? Or you could yeah, right, like you could bring back somebody from Freddy also. Honestly, I think it would have worked a little bit better. I think I like the idea of like Freddy losing his powers because nobody really believes about him anymore. They're doing a good job of suppressing all that information. Jason kind of being fully dead now kind of is a little weird when we I wish it would have like started where he comes up from hell maybe, and like that like we see him get like pull himself out of hell, kind of like Boba Fett out of the Sarlacc pit. That might have worked a little bit better because then it would have been like, okay, this makes sense to like what we last saw in Jason Goes to Hell Final Friday. Like he was dragged to hell. Literally, he goes to hell. And we saw Freddy grab his mask and pull it down, and I think that would have like having him come out and like kind of dust himself off, and then he sees his mom. And then that's when, you know, we get into the whole, like, Freddy and, like, him, like, being like, you need to go and, like, start terrorizing these kids. And I think, overall, I think, Ronnie, you did a pretty good job. Some of the kills are pretty good. I love when he, like, that one guy, the stupid boyfriend guy in the beginning, when he, like, bends him up backwards. There are some parts where it's like, wait, he killed his dad, and so Jason decapitates him, then puts the head back, but there's no blood there, and then the head does fall off, and then he decapitates, or he like splits him in half or something. I don't know. It's pretty funny because he just teleports out of nowhere, but I think that's like kind of the joke is that because Jason can like quote unquote teleport. It's this whole thing because there's a part in Jason Takes Manhattan when it's like, how did he get from like on top of like the building to down on the street and so fast? Because it's like it doesn't make any sense. He has to have teleportation powers, and obviously if he's a Deadite, that makes sense. Or when Jason's like going through the rave and just killing everybody, and then he gets lit on fire and he just like walks through the field and it's all lighting on fire. And even just them fighting together at the end, just like you just get to see them just duke it out, and like it's like that should have been most of the movie, I feel like. And I know you have to get to the point where, we got to bring Freddy into the real world. I feel like we could have done that a little bit earlier, maybe, but you know, for what we get for this film, honestly, I like it a lot. I think I'm gonna give it like 3.5 stars because, like, it's a solid entry in both franchises. Like, this is better than a lot of like a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Obviously not like the third or New Nightmare, the first one. But this also is a lot better than like Jason Takes Manhattan or like the second one. I know a lot of people like the second one. I'm just like, eh. Or like the fifth one's okay. I know. I think it's better than. It could be a little. Jason X is a little bit of like a different like soft spot. It's just because it's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's not a great movie, but like I just remember watching that. It's just so ridiculous sometimes. But I think this one's a little bit better than that one. I think I'd rather watch this one than that one. But I really wish we would have gotten more like this. Maybe a continuation of this one, or just more crossovers like this. That would have been awesome. Like I said, like if they would have done the whole thing with like Pinhead at the end, would have been great. Do I think? Does it change up like the orders of my previous like rankings? Maybe. I think I'd put this one. So I think I had the first Nightmare on Elm Street, the third one, and then New Nightmare. I think this one would go maybe above New Nightmare. I think that's where I'd put that. And then for Friday the 13th, because like I still my favorite one is still probably gonna be either like the third one or Jason Goes to Hell. I made my whole argument in that one. Go back and listen to that episode. But I made my argument about why I love that one. That's the one I grew up with the most. I watched and I loved it. It's the one that's the one that I got all. I thought I got all my lore for Jason from. And honestly, it doesn't make any sense with the rest of them. But then again, it like makes sense. Like it's one of those weird things. I talked about it in that one, but like it just made sense. Like, oh, that's why Jason comes back, because he's from the Necronomicon. And I don't know. I think it's pretty good. I love this idea of like bringing them together, of like all the years that it took to do this, and you know, it was hard. It was a long journey. The story is so. The acting is okay. I think, like I said, I think they could have done a little bit better with the story. But I think for what it is, you know, you bring in the Hypnosil, which is from Dream Warriors. You bring in Weston Hills, which is from, I think, Dream Warriors as well. You include things like Camp Crystal Lake. You bring in like, you add more lore to it, like Jason being afraid of water. I don't understand why he'd be afraid of water, but that's a whole nother thing. That is a little dumb. But I wish Freddy would have had a little bit more kills. I never realized until doing this that he barely kills like 2 people. And Jason kills the majority of people. Which actually, when you think about it, like he has more movies than even Nightmare on Elm Street does, but it's not more than Halloween does. I think it might be, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, it's more than Child's Play also, but Child's Play has a TV show. Well, I guess they both did have a TV show too. But yeah, no, Freddy vs. Jason is a great watch. It's fun to like. It's one of those fun ones that you just kind of shut off your brain. Don't have to think about like the other movies. You just get to watch, Jason go around killing a bunch of people, then Freddy getting mad, and then them fighting a lot in the dream world, and then them fighting in the real world, and just getting to see them together on screen together like that. Freddy quipping. Robert Englund in like his last performances. Freddy gives it all he's got. It's like he's like, this is the last time I'm doing it. I'm doing it one last time, and it's sad that that's the last time. I wish he would come back one more time, and we get a good nightmare to send him off on. Maybe do a sequel to this. I don't know. but no, this one's really good. I highly recommend it. You know, like I said, it was shot really well. It does feel like the time was made in. But other than that, like, I think most people, if you go back and you watch this, even just think about this, like, we're like, what, 20 years removed from this movie. Like, when we were talking about this movie back in like the early 2000s, and we were getting ready for this movie to come out, like, for us, it was like, man, this is crazy. Like, we hadn't seen this. We've never seen this before, except for, I mean, we got Alien versus Predator, but that had just happened. And we really never got, like, versus like this in, like, forever and ever, actually. I think, like, the last time that anything crossed over like this was, like, Wolfman and the Frankenstein or something like that. One of those old movies, right? So it's crazy to see, like, these two slasher icons just come together, and it kind of brings a tear to your eye, because you're like, man, well, it's a once in a lifetime thing that took over a decade, almost 2 decades to produce this, to give us this. It went through so much production hell, and like they couldn't even come up with like a good script until the very end. Just a product of its time. And I mean, there's nothing more to say. I mean, we got to see the Freddy and Jason come together in a film. We got to see them battle it out. In the end, you know, it's kind of tied in the end, but I like to think Jason won. I mean, he got Freddy's head off. He had the most kills. I don't know. It's just, I just wish we could see more like this. Yeah, this is such a good film. So great. Honestly, watch the spooky season. If you're gonna watch any of the other ones, watch this one too, including your watch list for scary movies this year. But yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say about Freddy vs. Jason. Did you want Freddy to win? Did you want Jason to win? Do you want to see more crossover films from other slashers like Michael, Chucky, or even Pinhead? I'd love to see them all in a battle world situation. We want to thank you all for listening, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe to get every new episode downloaded. Do you have any personal or fictional, paranormal, supernatural, or unexplainable stories? We'd love to read them on the podcast. Please send your stories, recommendations, or anything else to horrorboxpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to show more support, you can follow our socials on Instagram, Threads, or TikTok @horrorboxpodcast. Also, you can buy me a coffee at coffee.com/horrorboxpodcast. It really helps. Until next time, keep your friends close and your slashers closer. This is Dom, signing off from the Horrorbox.
Lori!
Think you're so smart, huh, bitch?
Freddy!
How sweet. Dark.